Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure as the superintendent of Peoria Unified School District to welcome you to our 2021 Patriotic Speech Contest. And so we have some amazing young people here today to share with you some ideas that they have around patriotism and what that means to them and to our community. So a couple of things. First of all, I want to say thank you very, very much to the team who is hosting this for us today. In Peoria Unified, our teachers, our support staff, our administrators, the entire community has worked incredibly hard to make sure that we were able to offer an in-person learning option throughout the majority of the year. And so another aspect of that is making sure that we continue to provide opportunities like this. And although in these crazy times and in the world of COVID, we've had to change kind of our process and what we're able to do, our team here today has just done an extraordinary job making sure that we were able to host this event. So thank you to the team. Thank you for the students and your flexibility. It's just a really wonderful thing. So before I go on, we're going to open our ceremony this afternoon with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Adriana Granada from Foothills Elementary School is going to join me and start us off. Thank you. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. All right, a couple of things just to kind of talk about. And first of all, I want to introduce our judges for today. First of all, we have Miss Kristen Henniger, who is currently our mathematics curriculum and instruction coach. Prior to being a coach, she taught multiple subjects in multiple grade levels. In the past, she's been a judge at the school level and she says she's honored to be the judge today and wishes everyone the very best of luck. We also have Mr. Alex Dominguez. He was also currently a curriculum and instructional coach. Prior to being a coach, Mr. Dominguez taught junior high English and social studies in California and in the Peoria Unified School District. As a teacher, he enjoyed judging the speech contest on his campus, and he wants to remind you all, as we have shared with you multiple times, take a deep breath and remember that you've already, by being here representing your school, have shown how awesome you are and excellent students and speakers you are. So congratulations from Mr. Dominguez. Also, we have Miss Mary Carlson, who is also a curriculum content coach for us. Prior to coaching, she taught junior high through the high school level for 16 years here in our district. She is Capturing Kids' Hearts Process Champion and former team leadership teacher and student council advisor. So we welcome her and thank her for being here. And lastly, as a judge, we have Miss Irene Tipton. Miss Tipton is currently a ELA curriculum and instructional coach. During her 30 years in education, she has been an assistant principal and instructional coach, a reading specialist, and she has taught multiple subjects in multiple grade levels in our elementary school. And a 30-year career is something to be very commended. So thank you for being here. And lastly, one of our most important positions in the speech contest, and that is our timer. Miss Carolyn Bradbury has worked in our human resources department since 2009 and has helped with the speech contest for the past 6 years. And she also wants to say good luck to all of our contestants. So quickly, let me just remind us why we're here. The goals that we have for this patriotic speech contest are this. First, to focus on the strengths, values, and virtues of the United States of America and to recognize individuals whose patriotism has positively impacted our country. We also want to give our students an opportunity to share with us and express what patriotism means to them. And finally, to honor the work, to honor how, as Mr. Dominguez says, how excellent these students are, and in the fact that they're here today representing their school. So thank you to all of our students and to our whole team. Lastly, let me just hit a few more thank yous. We want to thank all of our administrators and teachers, all of our speech coordinators at our sites and our schools, because without them, we wouldn't be able to be here today. So thank you for that. And lastly, it's my pleasure to turn the microphone over to our lead judge, because it's time to celebrate the real stars of this contest, our students. So on behalf of the Peoria Unified School District, our entire community, as our superintendent, thank you for your hard work. Thank you for taking this risk and being here today and sharing with us your thoughts. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Henniger.
From Olson Elementary School. You may begin.
The Supreme Court is the highest court in the federal judiciary of the United States of America. Welcome judges, fellow participants, and audience members. My name is Sydney Smith, and I'm an 8th grade student at Olson Elementary School. I believe that the Brown v. Board of Education landmark Supreme Court case decision had the biggest impact on America. It had the biggest impact from the case's background, how the students felt before the case, a story about an incident that happened 3 years prior than the case, and how we can use this to help guide us into a better future. But first, what is the Brown v. Board of Education case? Well, the Brown v. Board of Education case originated in 1951, when the public school district in Topeka, Kansas, refused to enroll the daughter of a local black resident, Oliver Brown, at the school closest to their home, instead requiring her to ride a bus to a black school. A total of 5 cases were made. Brown itself, Briggs v. Elliott, filed in South Carolina, Davis v. County School Board of Prince Edward County, filed in Virginia, Gebhardt v. Belton, filed in Delaware, and Bowling v. Sharp, filed in Washington, D.C. On May 17, 1954, the court ruled unanimously, 9-0, that racial segregation of students in public schools violated the 14th Amendment under the Equal Protection Clause, and therefore was unconstitutional. The Equal Protection Clause requires states to practice equal protection. This forces them to govern impartially and not draw any distinctions solely on differences that are irrelevant to a legitimate governmental objective. The court then overturned the separate but equal doctrine established nearly 60 years earlier in the Plessy v. Ferguson case in 1896. Also, before the Brown v. Board of Education case, many students were affected in a negative way. Before the case, African American students had been denied admittance to certain public schools based on laws allowing public education to be segregated by race. This led to a lower quality education for some students in Topeka, Kansas. This made students go out of their way or even take a bus just to go to school. All of this happening to the kids just trying to learn probably made them feel dehumanized. For example, in an article called School Segregation and Integration by the Library of Congress tells a story about students in a civics class at a segregated black Adkin High School. In North Carolina, 3 years earlier than the Brown v. Board of Education case, in November 1951, the students talked about their ideal features that a school should have for a class assignment. They then realized that the local white high school had everything that they had imagined, which planted the seeds for a student-led protest. The students went to the school board about the inequality, but the school board ignored their request for more funding. The students strategized and got 720 students on board without any parents or teachers knowing. They made a code which was played over the announcements, and every student walked out and marched downtown with place cards over their head to protest. The students refused to go to school for a week, and 18 months later, the Adkin High School was renovated and given a new gymnasium. Furthermore, we can use this decision to help guide us into a better future. Striking down segregation in the nation's public schools provided a major catalyst for the civil rights movement, making possible advances in desegregating housing, public accommodations, and institutions of higher education. Also, the decision inspired the civil rights movement of the late 1950s and 1960s. The schools are more segregated now than they are nearly 66 years ago. Imagine where we'll be in the next 60 years. In conclusion, what landmark Supreme Court case decision had the biggest impact on America? Well, I believe that the Brown v. Board of Education landmark Supreme Court case decision had the biggest impact on America. It had the biggest impact from the case's background, how the students felt before the case decision, a story about an incident that happened 3 years prior than the case, and how we can use this to make us have a better future. What case decision do you think had the biggest impact on America? Thank you.
Right. Next we have Jules Simpson from Apache Elementary School. You may begin.
It's very likely that about 40% of the people listening right now have been discriminated against because they are Black, an immigrant, or LGBTQ+. We still don't have equality in America. However, I believe we can learn from our wrongdoings and work to fix them. In fact, as Sukrash S. Dillon, former student at Yale University, once said, "Sometimes when things seem to be falling apart, they may actually be falling into place." I believe we can rise from the ashes of our past and create something new and better. The American government, our government, and their citizens need to show patriotism by working harder than ever to achieve the promise of freedom and equality that America was founded on. For the purposes of this speech and the time constraints involved, I'm going to focus on just 3 populations of people that do not have equality in America. Welcome parents, teachers, judges, and fellow contestants. My name is Jules, and I am in the 7th grade Gifted Academy at Apache Elementary. And I'm here to tell you that Black people, immigrants, and the LGBTQ+ community do not have equality in America. Black people have experienced horrible injustices in this country since the day they were kidnapped, ripped from their homeland and their families, and brought to this foreign land. Since that time, each Black family, each generation has had to survive endless pain at the hands of the oppressors who are in power in this country. Imagine these things: a hammer, a beanbag, a water bottle, a bag of Skittles and iced tea, a toy gun, a BB gun, and a cell phone. What do these things have in common? They were all things Black people were holding when they died at the hands of police who thought they were holding a gun. You are at least twice as likely to be killed by a cop in America than if you are any other race. That's not equal at all. Similar to what has happened to Black people, people in power are making it hard for immigrants to just exist. One of the most horrific ways this population has been treated is recent legislation that has officers take immigrant children from their families and put them in cages at the border. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, of the 628 kids that are at the border today, we have no idea where 330 of their parents are. Apparently, the other 298 parents are somewhere in the U.S. prison system, which is so vast we have no idea where to find them. We've made it illegal to come into our country after touting the fact that we are the best country in the world. That is not patriotic. LGBTQ+ people, who are at least 1 in 10 people listening to this speech right now, are having discriminatory laws placed against them at an alarming rate. Our former president has made many laws against the LGBTQ+ community that our current president is trying to undo. In addition to the laws, the discrimination these people face every day is horrible. Over 51% of transgender people report at least one suicide attempt. These people are killing themselves because you can't accept who they are. Now that we've reviewed the lack of equality in America and how we need to move closer towards equality and to be more patriotic, we can look at potential solutions. I want to emphasize the adult American's responsibility to vote. You need to know what and who are you voting for. It is critical that the people in legislation you are voting for support and further equality. You need to do research through reliable sources, just like you were taught in school. It is unpatriotic of you to fill yourself with disinformation and conspiracy theories you found on the internet and teach them to the kids sitting in class next to me. I am speaking for the children, for the youth. We are relying on you, as the adults, to know who you are voting for, what they are capable of, and what they support in order to achieve the promise of the freedom and equality America was founded on. One of the most effective ways to really make a difference is by speaking out. You can do this by signing petitions, safely attending protests or marches, or simply by spreading awareness. I prefer to support nonprofit organizations, so I'm going to share 3 organizations that I believe deserve your support. The first one is Black Lives Matter on blacklivesmatter.com, which is an organization that is big on fighting against disinformation and systemic oppression against Black individuals. To help the LGBTQ+ community, you could get yourself involved in 1 in 10 through 1in10.org, which is an organization that focuses on improving the self-esteem and self-acceptance of LGBTQ+ youth and young adults. To help the LGBTQ+ and the Black communities, as well as the immigrant communities, is the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU. This website has lots of information, ideas on safe immigration reform, and petitions and legislation. Overall, by doing something as simple as spreading awareness or supporting organizations that help spread awareness, you can create change. It is important to remember that patriotism is supporting what we were promised when our country was founded. We were promised liberty and justice for all, not some, not the people with the lifestyle you support, everybody, regardless of their race, gender identity, sexuality, or where they came from. America is the land of the free, but we can't have freedom if we are not equal. As it has been famously said in Hamilton, history has its eyes on you. Thank you.
Right, next up is Gabriel Cordero from Cotton Bowl Elementary School.
Good morning, judges, peers, fellow contestants, and audience members. Some may remember Theodore Roosevelt, and I'm sure most of you do. Theodore Roosevelt was an American statesman, conversationalist, naturalist, historian, and writer who served as the 26th President of the United States from 1901 to 1902, to 1909, my bad. Theodore Roosevelt once said, "No man is above the law, and no man is below it, nor do we ask any man's permission when we ask him to obey it." This year, many Americans have suffered and experienced a way higher level of violence than ever before. There are so many things that in our nation we need to change, and we need to make them different for the greater good. Today, this is what I'm here to inform you all about. John F. Kennedy once said, "We have the power to make this the best generation of mankind in the history of the world. Or we can make it the last." Riots need to be stopped. There are certain groups of protesters that need to be stopped. There are rule breakers as well as trespassers that need to be stopped. There's been a rise in casualties because of these people. Many have spread violence in our nation, and we need to keep down the violence. We need to stop the violence. We need to be peaceful. One day, a younger generation may see and may even believe that it's okay to barge into private property. They may truly think that it's okay to set a car on fire just to show their anger. They may hurt. They may literally beat up someone just to make a statement because they think it's okay. When will we tell them that it's not okay? Not just block their way or interfere in what they're doing, but actually stop them. John F. Kennedy also said, "If not us, who? If not now, when?" Abraham Lincoln said, "Whatever you are, be a good one." I use this statement to explain that if we are going to be a good citizen, then let's do it the right way. Not through violence to share our opinion, but through a patriotic mindset. For me, that means to be kind, to be honest and true, as well as so much more, and to be fair. The government may not be fair sometimes, so make a change then. But not through violence, not through pain or hurt, but through a patriotic act and mindset. As I say, do it the right way. Do it peacefully. And make sure that everyone sees where you are coming from so they know that you're doing it for the greater good. Abraham Lincoln also said, "I am a slow walker, but I never walk back." I truly believe Abraham Lincoln said that statement to refer that we as a nation can and will get better. It may be happening slower than we anticipated, but that we will not fall back into past wars, to past anarchy, all those times where we were unfair to others. I believe we need to make a change in our nation. No more North America, no more South America battling each other, no more division, no more two different armies, but unity. Unity as a nation, not political groups, but as the America that the rest of the world sees us as, with power, strength, and authority, keeping each other safe and protected. Today, I hope that you all see and truly and fully comprehend where I'm coming from, that we need to stop all violence. We can and we will get better as a nation. We need to grow stronger, and hopefully we will grow stronger together in unity. Hopefully, our nation can become a true patriotic nation once again. Finally, Abraham Lincoln once said, "Be sure you put your feet in the right place. Then stand firm." To summarize everything that I've said, we need to stop all violence. We need to be peaceful with each other. No more division, but unity. Unity as a nation together, protecting each other, and knowing that we are all safe together. Today, this is my and hopefully your declaration. Thank you.
There has been many different challenges that America has faced throughout history, but one that stood out to me was women's rights. Women's rights help empower women and create equality for both genders. There shall never be another season of silence until women have the same rights men have on this green earth. Once spoken by Susan B. Anthony. Susan B. Anthony was a women's rights activist who played a vital role in the women's suffrage movement. The women's suffrage movement was a long campaign that promoted women's rights, such as their right to vote, their right to have a profession of choice, and their right to have an education. Welcome judges and fellow contestants. My name is Nevaeh and my speech is titled Women's Rights. Women have many rights nowadays, including the right to vote. But before 1920, it was illegal for them to do so. In 1848, the women's suffrage movement began to help women earn the right to vote. It was a decades-long fight that was launched by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott in London during the World Anti-Slavery Convention. After the movement ended in 1920, women got the right to vote, as shown in the 19th Amendment. Just imagine fighting for a right that another person has, but you don't because you're a female. Imagine being so passionate in something that you fight for it for 72 years. It's amazing how so many people came together to help women earn the right to vote, because guaranteed the campaign was not an easy task. Many of them got discouraged and wanted to give up, but they didn't. Women now have the right to vote because of those men and women who fought for what they believed was right. There are still some rights that aren't fully equal yet, but women do have many rights now, and this includes the right to vote. Another right that women never used to have is the right to have a profession of choice. In the past, women were very limited on professions that they could pursue. Women weren't allowed to work as lawyers, politicians, soldiers, and many other jobs. People thought that women shouldn't have these jobs because they're simply too emotional and not as strong as men. So, women were stereotyped to be cooks, cleaners, and even house care workers. But women are so much more than that. Women are smart. They can own their own business, they can work in the medical field, and they can be lawyers. Women are strong. They can compete in sports, they can join the military, and they can even work in detective industries. Women are allowed to almost any job of their preference now. Even though their pay for some professions is less than what men get paid, women have still come a long way. The third and final right that women have recently gained in the US is the right to have an education. Many countries like India, Egypt, Afghanistan, and even Chad do not allow women to have an education. In America, the women's liberation movement gave women the right to have an education. It emerged in the late 1960s and continued into the 1980s. In 1962, during the movement, multiple women went on to seek higher education, and there was around 26,000 women who attended that university. Now, both men and women are able to have an education of their choice. Each time a woman stands up for herself, without knowing it, possibly without claiming it, she stands up for all women. Once said by Maya Angelou, a civil rights activist. Anthony, Stanton, and Angelou are just some of the strong and intelligent women that paved the way for young women like myself. I believe that without those women, our world would not be the same. I never realized until now how much of a privilege it is to be going to school, to be standing here right now giving this speech. I believe that women should stand up for not only themselves, but their right to vote, their right to have a profession of choice, and their right to have an education. Women's rights are continuously changing. History was recently made in 2021 when the first female vice president was elected in the United States. I am honored to be a female of this generation in the United States. Thank you.
Imagine waking up in the morning ready for a great day of learning and fun. Your parents drop you off at school hoping that you'll be safe and happy. You walk up to the door when someone stops you. They tell you that you cannot go to this school because you are black, because the color of your skin is just slightly darker than anyone else's at that school. Now come back to me. That right there was the reality of black children in the 1800s. In 1865, a group of laws called the Black Codes were passed throughout the South, segregating whites and African Americans. Ever since that day, whites and blacks had to be separated at bars, drinking fountains, and even bathrooms. Good morning, judges and fellow contestants. My name is Dominic VanGrackel, and I believe that the Brown versus the Board of Education is one of the best landmark cases. As a young African-American student, without this case, I would not be standing here today delivering this speech, nor even in the same building as most of you. This case is also about a young African-American woman that wanted to go to a school closer to her house, but was denied because that school was for whites only. Now think of that. This young lady was denied her education because the color of her skin. Does that sound equal? Does that sound like equality? Because the board says it is. The board says that the 14th Amendment states that people must be treated equally. It does not state that people must be treated the same. They also claim that all schools have the same education and materials, but Brown states that black schools have less funding and materials such as textbooks and basic supplies. In 1954, the Browns sued the Board of Education of Topeka. They argued that the segregated school system did not give Miss Brown the equal protection that the 14th Amendment required. The Browns suggested that the Supreme Court look over the case, and they agreed to do so. The Supreme Court looked over all the decisions of the board and made a final decision. They decided that the board's decision to decline Linda Brown from that school was a direct violation of the 14th Amendment's equal protection laws. Although the decisions in this case ordered the integration of public schooling, it did not explain how to accomplish this standard. The American school system is supposed to be diverse and different from any other country, hence we are called a big melting pot. But is it really equal? Studies show that only 13% of college students are either African American or Hispanic, but have recently been seeing a steady increase that should continue in the future. Linda Brown's courage and bravery shows me what a true patriot is and should be today. Many people think that patriotism is just showing love for your country, but it can be a number of things, including changing your country, making it a better place for everyone, not just whites, not just blacks, but for everyone. This case is the reason I can stand up here today and call myself an African American citizen of the United States and not be ashamed by the color of my skin. Thank you for your time.
Miss Adriana Granada from Twin Hills Elementary School.
does freedom mean? What does freedom mean to America? What does freedom mean to you? Welcome judges, fellow contestants, and audience members. My name is Adriana Granada, a 7th grade Foothills Fine Arts Academy student. On July 4th, 1776, our founding fathers adopted the Declaration of Independence, which told us what our freedom meant. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The United States Declaration of Independence is the most patriotic document because it declared us our independence from Great Britain. It states that all men are created equal, and it set the value of justice for all that our nation was founded upon. Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "In the truest sense, freedom cannot be bestowed. It must be achieved." One of the first things that our Declaration of Independence did was make us free, and it definitely was achieved. On July 4th, 1776, our founding fathers adopted this great document, mostly written by Thomas Jefferson after a year of fighting in the Revolution. This certificate told us that every human being has natural rights and that they are allowed to protect these rights. Before the Declaration of Independence was made, Americans were British, and under the law of King George III, who treated the 13 colonies very poorly. The king, as well as Parliament, taxed the colonies without their say. They weren't even allowed to vote for the laws that they had to follow. Isn't that ridiculous? They were silenced. They were not allowed to represent what they stood for and their opinions. As the slogan goes, no taxation without representation. In America, equality is the one thing that we strive for, whether it be between genders or even races. As the Declaration of Independence states, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Our great nation has done so much to make sure that everyone feels welcome in our society, and this document started it all. In the years to come, we fought a civil war to end slavery and added amendments to our Constitution giving rights to all genders and races. But equality is an ongoing challenge that must always be worked on. According to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, who interviewed many people of both races and with all genders and races, approximately 3,453 people found out that 45% of African Americans experience inequality when trying to rent an apartment or buy a house, and 41% of women inequality in equal pay and promotion opportunities. This is one thing in America that I believe we can change. In the words of Pope Francis, inequality is the root of social evil. The preamble to the Constitution states that the basic functions of our government begins with to establish justice and ends with to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Later, our U.S. Pledge of Allegiance stated one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In other words, there can be no liberty without justice. The Supreme Court's job, the highest court in the United States, is to interpret the laws based off of the Constitution and to make sure that everyone is equally represented. When our government was formed, 3 separate branches of government were set up: the executive, legislative, and judicial. The judicial branch is the one that gives us our justice. The Supreme Court consists of the Chief Justice and 8 associate justices, as chosen by the President and the majority vote of the Senate. As Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "We want a Supreme Court which will do us justice under the Constitution, not over it. In our courts, we want a government of laws and not of men." Given these points, our United States Declaration of Independence is the most patriotic document because it declared us our independence from Great Britain. It states that all men are created equal, and it set the value of justice for all that our nation was founded upon. These are the results in our founding fathers' actions in adopting this great document. In the words of Marion Wright Edelman, the Declaration of Independence was always our vision of who we wanted to be, our ideals of freedom and justice, how we were going to be different, and what the American experiment was going to be about. Thank you and have a great day.
Maduri from Heritage Elementary School.
I believe the word liberty isn't just a word, it's an ideology. For centuries, this nation has been founded on three main principles: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. One of these gives us the right to freely speak our minds, stand up for our beliefs, and more. Liberty has a vast amount of value and worth. It comes with many different beliefs and opinions. Welcome, judges, guests, and fellow contestants. My name is Shreya Maduri, representing Heritage. The basic definition of liberty is the quality or state of being free. We can all agree that liberty comes from the basic rights we're given from the Constitution, but it isn't just that, it's more. Liberty is an ideology that is very significant because liberty is the reason I'm here speaking. Liberty is the reason our judges are sharing their thoughts and opinions on us contestants. Liberty is the reason why we're here at this gathering. Now, I'd like everyone to close their eyes and imagine you're a machine controlled by authority and people with too much money in their hands. You're programmed to have no thoughts, feelings, or emotions. You have no rights. You exist without knowing you exist. And everyone, open your eyes. That's what it feels like without liberty in this world. Now I'd like everyone to think. Think of the situation I just told you about, and think of a word that describes it. The first word that came into my mind was dystopia. This that I just described to you was a dystopia. This is what our country would have been if liberty didn't exist in this world. Now you might think it's impossible. It's impossible for anything like that to exist or to ever exist, but there are actually countries that are run this way. Countries like North Korea, China, Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba are controlled by dictators that give little to no rights to their citizens and censor people's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and eventually their lives. According to the State of World Liberty Index 2020, North Korea ranks number 183 out of the 183 countries evaluated for the amount of freedom in their country. Iran ranks 172, Cuba ranks 179, and Venezuela ranks 182 out of the 183 countries evaluated. Imagine just how the citizens of these countries might be living if they're prosecuted, tortured, and they suffer just from the idea of speaking out against the injustices happening in their own country. Here's an example. Recently in the news, you might have heard of a military coup in Myanmar, where a democratically elected leader was forcefully unseated, overthrown, and replaced by a military leadership that took control and arrested the democratically selected leader. When people took to the streets to oppose this autocracy, they were deprived of their liberties to protest. Hundreds of people were arrested and tortured. Another example, my mother, she used to work for the United Nations. She used to go to Africa, and she used to educate people in Africa, the kids. Now, the education they had there, they didn't have a dictatorship, thank God, but the education they had, it was mostly censored. They weren't in control of what they were learning. The teachers weren't in control of what they were teaching their students. So my mom thought that they'll just do whatever. She didn't care about any of that. She said she will teach them whatever they're allowed, and she'll teach them whatever that's worth teaching them. She will teach them what's right for the world, and she will not care about what should be censored and what should be not. So, we always use our rights without actually thinking how much they are really worth. Do we ever realize how much these rights are valuable to us? I'd like to call upon everyone, all of us, to protect and defend liberty, because liberty is a necessity that is very precious. Liberty is never guaranteed, and it's always threatened. Liberty can be lost in a single generation if it's not advanced and defended. We have to learn to fight for our rights and liberties because John Adams, one of our founding fathers, once said, "Liberty, Once lost is lost forever. Thank you.
Okay, so a quick reminder that right after Michael, we'll be taking a little bit of a break. So next up is Michael Radar from Ira A. Murphy. You may begin.
Now, as we all know, the U.S. military is the most powerful and intimidating military in the world. But to claim this power came at a cost. In the year 2020, it came at a $902 billion cost. But what are we spending this much money on? And what effect does it have on Americans? And what effect does it have on the men and women that are fighting for this country? Now, because I would like to be statistically accurate, I would like to go through with you our military budget. The Defense Department spent $720 billion. The Department of Veterans spent $220 billion. We spent $15 billion on nukes. We also spent $80 billion on the intelligence community. Now, if we take one of those departments, let's say the Defense Department, and compare it with the rest of the 5 powers, which are the UK, China, Russia, and France, we combine all their numbers, we get a number of $424 billion. That still leaves a $300 billion gap. With that big of a gap, we can have another stimulus check, just about how big of a gap we are just spending compared to the rest of the world. Now, you might be asking me, why do we spend this much? Well, I can't answer that, but what I do know is that America is paranoid. We are so stuck in the Darwin struggle, and we will take the step to damage ourselves if it means we can stay in power. Now, the effects this has on Americans is quite vast. 26,000 Americans die a year because of lack of health care, and nearly 8 million Americans are in poverty. We need to cut the military budget to make more room to apply benefits to those communities. Now, let's say the veterans. Veterans, the people that we treat so great, the people that we congratulate on their service, make up 11% of the homeless population. Of that 11%, 70% of them suffer from substance abuse, and 45% suffer from mental illness. The people we congratulate, the people we say are so great, are often just thrown away like trash after they go through the service. Now, I do know that this cannot happen overnight. We cannot just cut the military budget and everything will go away. But I think a very good step, and a very important one, is as a country to come together and realize that we are not great because we can take out a nation. We are not great because we have the greatest economy. We are great because we're trying to do something that no one else is trying to do. We're putting so many different types of people, culture, and ethnic groups and trying to make it work. We are flawed, we are struggling, but we're trying. Now, spending money just to spend money is not patriotic. Thank you.
Imagine. You're marching down the streets of your town for what you believe is right. You're marching. Imagine. You're marching down the streets of your town for what you believe is right. You're marching against the policies made by a few fighting for the rights for your children. Imagine. You're marching down the streets of your town for what you believe is right. You're marching against the policies made by a few fighting for the rights for your children, the next generation, and yourself. You march for miles, holding up signs for hours and hours, and even stand in line, day after day, year after year, standing strong against oppression, demanding justice for all. Sounds fun, right? You probably said no, but this is what women had to do to earn the rights that we have today. Hello, fellow contestants and judges. My name is Bailey Olson, and I am here to talk to you about what women have accomplished since the founding of this nation and why it's important to remember them. In 1840, our organized journey begins. In 1848, the first official women's suffrage meeting was held. Then they networked, protested, and eventually got the attention of the public. But it wasn't until 1920 that the 19th Amendment was signed into law, giving all American white women the right to vote. However, the fight wasn't over yet. They were determined to advance the progress so that all women would have the right to vote. Then finally, in 1948, women of color were included in the right to vote. Women's rights are civil rights, so these women continue to use their organization skills and networking to further the process towards equality. For example, in 1955, Rosa Parks helped launch the civil rights movement. In 1981, the first woman was seated on the Supreme Court. Then in 2007, the year I was born, the first woman was elected to serve as Speaker of the House. Women and people of color were in a deep hole while white men were already at the surface when our nation first started. The rights, power, and positions that we women have today were worked for, marched for, and were earned through great sacrifice and decades of struggle. What kept these women going? It was a goal, a dream, a better future. It was the hope that one day opportunities for their children, the next generation, would be better than the last. They filled the hole so we wouldn't have to. When I think of all the shoveling our ancestors have done to get us out of this hole, I think of us getting stronger and the realization that hard work and persistence is key to success. Notably, for the first time in history, two women sit behind the President of the United States. One, as the first Black woman to be Vice President of the United States, and the other as the first female Speaker of the House. This is big. This is progress for all women. For this, I'd like to thank and remember the women who came before us, the women who worked hard for my right to be here today, to learn and to participate in ways that weren't allowed not so many years ago. Thanks to those who made it possible for girls to have the same opportunity as boys. And thank you for the opportunity to speak here today.
Megan Lamontagne from Elementary School will be up next. You may begin.
Environmental health. What do you think of when you hear that? Most commonly, people think of plants, animals, and trees, but it's much bigger than that. Welcome judges and contestants. My name is Megan Lamontagne from Miss Raper's 7th grade class in Oasis Elementary School. And today, my speech shall be about environmental health, what it is, how it affects us, how to help it, and how it relates to patriotism. First off, what is environmental health? Environmental health is the branch of public health, which does multiple things for the public's well-being. It mostly focuses on improving the relationship between the public and their environment, promoting the human health, and fostering healthy and safe communities. This is a key component in any type of comprehensive public system. This specific field works to advance policies and programs to reduce chemical and other environmental exposures in the air, water, soil, and food to protect everybody, including communities, and make sure they're healthy and safe. According to records in Flint, Michigan, emergencies such as the Zika virus outbreak, Hurricane Katrina, and the drinking water crisis all show the impact environmental health can have on us. Pregnant women and their fetuses are the most vulnerable to the Zika virus outbreak. Hurricane Katrina made sure that many low-income households have not been able to fully recover, even though it's been several years. And many low-income households have been the most exposed to the lead-contaminated drinking water. Environmental health helps us learn about this to make sure we can stay healthier and safer. We need to play a more active role in this. The World Health Organization estimates 12.6 million deaths happen every year. And that means like a total global deaths, which means that's 1/4 in total global deaths. Environmental risk factors such as ultraviolet radiation, climate change, let me think. And water, soil, and air pollution all contribute to more than 100 diseases and injuries. Unintentional injuries, respiratory infection, several types of cancers, strokes, and heart disease are the top 5 causes of all environmental-related deaths. On top of that, we can make it worse by putting toxic metals and products and chemicals into the stuff we use every day. But then we go ahead and we don't recycle, and we put them into the ground, oceans, and forests, causing them to become toxic and killed. This can kill the plants because it goes ahead and it sinks into the ground, which then poisons and kills off all the nutrients and plants in the soil. It kills the ocean by all of that toxic stuff seeping into the coral, which then kills all of those animals that depend on it, including the coral itself. Start helping make a difference by planting a tree to help provide healthier air. Maybe stop burning your yard waste, which can put all of this toxic gas into the air, which can affect your heart and your lungs. And reusing plastic bags, water bottles, and more to go ahead and help prevent from all of that getting into our oceans and our ground, which can help, which pollutes all of our stuff. Now, you may be wondering, what does any of this have to do with patriotism? To me, patriotism means you're caring about your country, you're helping it, you're protecting it. If you do this, you're being patriot about your country because you're caring about it. I mean, if we don't start doing this now, there may end up being no country that we can be patriotic about. In conclusion, environmental health is a huge part of today's society, and we need to start helping out with it. Otherwise, there will end up being very grave consequences. Remember to take care of your environmental health around you and keep America amazing. Thank you for your time.
Up next is Miss Abigail Welch from Peoria. You may begin.
Liberty, by its very definition, means the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. Welcome, judges, fellow contestants, and virtual audience members. My name is Abby Welch, and I am here to share with you today what liberty means to me. So liberty's definition in simpler terms is that liberty equals freedom. Freedom in life, freedom in democracy, freedom to practice any religion or no religion, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, the freedom to petition the government, and the freedom to protest in a peaceful manner. And the best part is that all of the rights and freedoms I just listed are protected by the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, also known as the Bill of Rights. Benjamin Franklin once said, "Liberty, where liberty dwells, there is my country." He is saying that his loyalty isn't to his geographical location per se, but instead to his freedom. In his mind, liberty is one of the most important things an individual can have. So much so that he is willing to pledge his freedom and loyalty to a country based on the sole idea of rights, freedom, and opportunity. A country where you can wake up and live your life the way you choose without fear of persecution as long as your choices do not impede on others' natural rights. Now imagine this. You live in a country where you have to follow a king. A dictator, a ruler, a person with absolutely no qualifications to run a country except for the fact that they were born into some sort of royal family. You know this scenario isn't right and you want to speak out and go against your ruler's command, but you've seen several brave individuals attempt this and they all face fates, sometimes as serious as death. You decide to stay quiet, but the hunger of change, the struggle to keep your mouth shut eats you from the inside out. Tired of biting your tongue, you fantasize of a day where things could be different. A day where fear does not hold you back. A day where you can wake up in a country free to say whatever you want and make your own decisions. In America, we can wake up this way every day and we often take it for granted. America has self-government and democracy, and that in itself is liberty. John Adams once said, "Once liberty is lost, it's lost forever." 57 nations in the world aren't free. 57 nations have citizens that bite their tongue even when they disagree with their government. 57 nations don't have a constitution to protect their rights. 57 nations have never experienced liberty. As United States citizens, we are some of the lucky few people that have. We wake up every day and we experience this rush of freedom. Waking up and choosing whether or not to go to church on a Sunday may seem like a normal routine for you and your family, but having that choice, that privilege, is a novelty for many people in different areas of the world. I am proud to say that I represent the land founded on liberty, of freedom, America, the home of the brave. George Washington once said, "Liberty, once it takes root, is a plant of rapid growth." I believe that this is a plant we must continue to preserve and nurture for several generations to come. Thank you for your time.
United States of America is one of the greatest countries in the world. We have great freedoms and many liberties. But if hatred and violence between our two main political parties continue, our nation will divide. And when our nation is divided, you can say goodbye to the peaceful democracy our forefathers worked so hard to create. Hello, parents, judges, and fellow contestants. My name is Seth Booker, and I believe that our nation will not succeed if tensions between the political parties continue. Our country has two main parties who are often at odds with one another, the Democrats and the Republicans. These two groups have evolved since political parties started, way back during the Washington administration. Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton wanted to create a national bank that would make the federal government stronger. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson opposed him. Hamilton's followers were known as Federalists, while Jefferson's followers were known as Democratic Republicans. When much has changed since the 1790s, the two-party system remains the same. Unfortunately, through their constant arguing and attacking of one another, our two parties are tearing the nation apart. The only way to fix this is with bipartisanship, or in simpler words, compromising and uniting. There are many brilliant people in America today, and we should make haste to use them, regardless of their political parties. Abraham Lincoln certainly did this. When he was elected president, the nation was at war with itself. Lincoln knew that to save the country, he needed the best people in his cabinet. So the Republican president found Democratic leaders such as Edwin Stanton and Gideon Welles. They were all appointed to Lincoln's cabinet, and even though they had differing beliefs, this team of rivals worked together to save the nation. When later asked why he did this, Lincoln responded that he would not deprive the country of brilliant brains just because they disagreed with him. When our nation suffers, we must be willing to work with everyone in an effort to strengthen it. President John F. Kennedy stated that we must not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer. We must seek the right answer. We must unite for the good of our citizens. On September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks caused chaos and unrest in America. Soon after, every member of Congress, Democrat and Republican, went out on the steps of the U.S. Capitol and sang "God Bless America." They may have had opposing views, but when it mattered most, they loved their country more than their party. Another way to unite is through compromise. Compromise is finding a middle ground both sides can agree on. This was used during the Constitutional Convention of 1787, where the U.S. Constitution was created. Some delegates wanted the largest states to have more representation in Congress, while others wanted each state to have equal representation. Benjamin Franklin and Roger Sherman came out with a compromise. There would be two parts of Congress. One would favor larger states with representation based on population. The other would favor smaller ones with equal representation for all states. The result was the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. If our founding fathers could compromise when the fate of our nation was on the line, can't we do that today? In addition to compromising and uniting, there are some practical ways to prevent the nastiness between the political parties. For instance, maybe we could shorten the campaigning time. In Canada, candidates have up to 50 days to campaign, while there's really no limit in America. With less time to campaign comes less time to slander and attack one another. Perhaps we could also put a budget on campaign spending. With less money to spend, candidates use it to promote themselves instead of insult others. True patriots aren't Democratic or Republican. True patriots are American. That's the only distinction that should matter. If we keep attacking each other, grave things will happen. If we are truly patriots, we will compromise and agree. If we are truly Americans, we will unite. We will use our ideas and our talents to make the United States of America remain one of the greatest countries in the world. In the wise words of the Greek writer Aesop, united we stand, divided we fall. Thank you.
up, we have Miss Abby Harris from Skyview Elementary. You may begin.
I want you to answer these questions to yourself. Can you vote? How long have people like you been able to vote? How has voting changed? How does it impact you as an individual, and what is the relationship between voting and democracy? Good afternoon. My name is Abby Harris, and I'm here to provide insight on these questions for you. Without further ado, let's begin. Let's go back in time together. Imagine that you are going back through the history of America. Whether you walk down a hallway through time or dive into a book, I'd like you to stop at 1776, the birth year of America. What about voting, though? I don't have to tell you that it was a specific group of people who were allowed to vote. Only property-owning white men over the age of 21 were allowed to vote. Now, if you go forward to 1789, there were only about 6% of the population that was allowed to vote. To put that in numbers of America's current population, only about 23 million Americans would vote. And while that seems like a lot, there are a total of 328 million Americans, so I'd say it's probably not that many. There are actually more than 23 million Americans in the state of California alone. In 1856, now all states, all white men are allowed to vote. It took them 80 years just to make the voting strictly white men. 14 years later, in 1870, the 15th Amendment was passed stating that you can't deny a vote to any American citizen due to their race, ethnicity, or other discriminations. Then, 2 decades later, in 1890, Wyoming became the first state to allow women to vote. But it wasn't until 30 years later, in 1920, when the 19th Amendment was passed, that all women across the country were allowed to vote. Now, if you go 45 years after that to 1964, this was when the special taxation that was put on voting was finally removed. And in 1971, the voting age was lowered from 21 to what we now know, 18. And in 1975, voting materials were released in multiple languages. After 200 years, voting had become an equal opportunity for all. Now, in 2020, there were still issues with voting. Now, even though everyone can vote, many choose not to, and there are limited polling places. But I want to bring you back to this room in your seat with me in 2021. So, suffrage, as defined in the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is the right of voting or the act of exercising this right to vote. Women's suffrage, or the 19th Amendment, was ratified on August 18, 1920. That same year, on November 2, 1920, more than 8 million women voted in the election for the first time. For me, this date is important not just because women were allowed to vote, but it signified that their long fight for their right to vote was finally over. As a young woman, being able to vote in a few years makes me a little apprehensive. But in the words of Susan B. Anthony, someone struggled for your right to vote. Use it. I refuse to let the struggle of millions go for granted by not voting. Democracy is based on the conviction that there are extraordinary possibilities within ordinary people. These are the words of American pastor Harry Emerson Fosdick. Democracy is a government where the power lives within the people and is exercised through periodic, free elections. Imagine trying to have a government run by people who can't vote. It would be downright apocalyptic, chaos in every color. Voting is not only crucial to democracy, but is part of the foundation that makes democracy possible. To conclude, over the period of the last 245 years, voting has evolved and changed from something limited and disproportionate to something free and equal. Voting is a majorly important concept within democracy as we know it. Voting has changed. How has it changed for you? In what year would you have gained the right to vote?
Once upon a time, Sleeping Beauty was under a wicked sleeping spell and couldn't awake to escape the castle guarded by a fire-breathing dragon. Only one could save her, Prince Philip. If he failed to fight the adversary, the kingdom would be lost. Everyone depended on Philip to fulfill his duty and save the princess, who couldn't save herself. Although the real world isn't a fairy tale with princesses and dragons, we sometimes live through the same dilemmas and problems. There are many, not just in the U.S., who feel helpless and can't save themselves. The U.S. has a responsibility to protect the people in and out of our country from injustice and infringement on their basic rights. Although remaining peaceful should remain our goal, we should interfere when a situation has grown violent. Basic human rights include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as stated in the Declaration of Independence. Some governments argue that the U.S. is wrong and that people are expendable, but Eleanor Roosevelt put it best, stating, "Those who have glimpsed freedom will never be content until they have secured it for themselves." After 2 world wars, the U.S. understood the urgency to address human rights and those suffering from oppression. When a country is physically harming a people or taking away their natural rights, the U.S. can and should step in to help. Elie Wiesel taught, sometimes we must interfere. When human lives are in danger, when human dignity is in jeopardy, national borders and sensitivities become irrelevant. In the early 1990s, Rwanda was in the midst of a civil war. The controlling Hutu party and its allies sought to remove the minority voice by nearly exterminating the country's Tutsi population. What many world leaders failed to acknowledge was that intervention was not meddling in a civil war, but stopping genocide, similar to what we declared after World War II would not happen again. Not only should we have stepped in while tension was growing, but we definitely should have helped during the 38 days of systematic mass slaughter. Families and children were helpless against these attacks. In March of 1998, President Clinton issued an apology, emotionally acknowledging the world's error. He stated, "We come here today partly in recognition of the fact that we in the United States and world community did not do as much as we could have and should have done to try to limit what occurred in Rwanda." It could be said that Prince Philip failed to come to Sleeping Beauty's aid. Many lives could have been saved in 1994 if the U.S. intervened before, or at least during, this genocide. To argue that since war is inevitable, we have no duty to seek honorable and peaceful solutions is the epitome of illogic. Edwin Firmage. We shouldn't depend on violence as long as world peace is what we desire. Democracy is based on the idea of peaceful transfer of power. If one leader refuses to step down, the government collapses. We must remember that violence should ideally be avoided. We don't only have to help in dire militant situations. We can provide humanitarian help too. In Uganda, we are teaching better medicinal practices and how to test for malaria. In just 1 year, those who got tested for malaria rose from 45% to 86%. Ogwang says, "I am confident these efforts will continue due to the continuous educational sessions for staff and patients." Nations should always make an effort to remain peaceful, but when is it necessary to use force? I believe that if a country is injuring or killing their people, the U.S. has the moral authority to use force to stop the situation. Like in Rwanda, when Tutsi families and children were being killed, we should have stepped in to protect them from the danger they couldn't protect themselves from. Let us remember, what hurts the victim most is not the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander. Elie Wiesel. We must take action against those who deprive people of liberty and deny their voices. Let us also help those who silently suffer from hunger, poverty, and oppression. If we stand by as affliction takes place, we are just as bad as the afflictor. Thank you.
up is Gonzalez from the Elementary School.
There is a flower that blooms once a year. Its petals, delicate, pink, exquisite. Its lifespan mere days. Its fallen blossoms, blanketing, spreading, permeating, leaving lasting effects on all who have witnessed its beauty. This flower? Look no further than on the grounds of our state capitol. Cherry blossom trees that surround the Jefferson Monument. A monument etched with Thomas Jefferson's words, some of which that helped our founding fathers draft the Constitution. If you look closely, you'll read, as new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change with the change of circumstances, institutions must advance also to keep pace with the times. These words show us that like the cherry blossom's lasting effects, our Constitution remains a living document that adapts to our times, and that is shown frequently within our nation's past, present, and future. To start off, the past plays a perfect role in how the Constitution remains a living document. In fact, imagine for a moment that the date is March 3rd, 1913. You are walking down the unusually crowded streets of Washington, D.C., when suddenly you start to see a throng of women marching down the road. Their voices all together and distinct, their chants proud and filled with words such as, "Votes for women," and "We are a part of society, so let us participate in it." This was the famous 1913 Women's Suffrage Parade, a parade filled with brave women whose strife helped bring forth the 19th Amendment, voting rights for women. In essence, a voice for women, a voice for me and all the other young girls in this wonderful country. This is a perfect example of how the Constitution remains a living document even today. America's present really is showing that our framework, the Constitution, is easily able to change with its times as new ideas and new issues appear. A current amendment that has been proposed to Congress is the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, which would guarantee full equality for men and women. According to melanie.house.gov, the ERA is a constitutional amendment which would prohibit denying or abridging equal rights under law in the United States or any state on the account of gender. This includes guaranteeing equal footing for men and women and ensuring that government programs benefit men and women equally. But this is only the beginning. New amendments, ideas, and proposals will continue to reach Congress because, as Thomas Jefferson points out, with the change of circumstances, institutions must advance also to keep pace with the times. Times that are yet to come. Times in our America's future. What will her future look like? What issues will force our Constitution to truly be a living document, one that changes with its times? Quite possibly the dispute of whether or not to hold our Supreme Court justices for life. How about age restrictions on them? After all, America's aging population is growing at a rapid rate. According to Alzheimer's Association, 5.8 million Americans aged 65 and older are living with Alzheimer's dementia, a disease that can surely affect one's reasoning such as a Supreme Court justices. Is it time to draw the line? Maybe so. America's unique democracy can only be strong if we have just leaders of sound mind and body. Columbia law says that term limits would help usher out judges with mental decrepitude and loss of stamina. This would ensure that we have the right justices to be making the decisions that will influence our future. In order to make the Constitution a continuous document, we must be able to keep our own institutions up to speed. All in all, our Constitution remains a living document that continues to adjust to our nation's times. Times from long ago, right now today, and in our future that awaits us. What will America look like when that time comes? I can tell you, a flower, delicate, pink, and exquisite. Nestled within will be words you've heard before. As new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change with the change of circumstances, institutions must advance also to keep pace with the times. Cherry blossoms,
delicate, pink, exquisite, timeless.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our live stream of the 7th and 8th grade 34th Annual Patriotic Speech Contest. All of the speeches have concluded for the afternoon, and the judges have gone into chambers to deliberate the placements for the contestants. We expect that will take approximately 15 to 20 minutes, at which point we will return with those results and you'll see students receive their certificates and trophies. So again, the judges are deliberating. We estimate that they will return by 2:20 p.m. Thank you very much for your patience. We are still waiting for the judges to finish their deliberations. We appreciate your patience and hope to be back with the results very soon. Thank you.
We're going to give the certificates? Yep. Are we going to? I think she's good. Are you good?
All right. Once again, we're going to bring you all up. We're going to give you a certificate. Please, I keep them, because honestly, my kids didn't, and made me cry. So, because this really is an amazing thing, and when we say that you guys did a great job, that is not just words. We had a really difficult time. You guys all did fabulous, and passion was there, and goosebumps galore. But right now we want to bring up Sydney Smith from Alta Loma. Nice work. And then we're going to bring up Jules Simpson from Apache Elementary School. Gabriel Cordero from Cotton Bowl. Nevaeh DNA from Coyote Hills. Dominic VanGrackel, Desert Harbor. Also having a birthday today. Woo! Happy birthday. Adriana, Granada from Foothills Elementary. Shreya Maduri from Heritage Elementary School. Michael Raynard from Ira A. Murphy. Good. No. Okay. We're going to try. And then we have Megan Lamontagne from Oasis Elementary School. Yay! You gave me a perfect thing to rhyme it to. Abigail Welch from Peoria Traditional School. Seth Booker from Santa Fe. from Skyview Elementary. Elena Lucera from Sunset Heights. Charlie Gonzalez from Vistancia Elementary. We're going to do it again. Miss Bailey Olson from Oakwood Elementary School. Yay! Now we're going to bring up Miss Marla Hobbs, who is the one and only, and she is going to do the announcements of the top 5.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Henniger. I was able to watch live stream back there just to make sure we were online and everything, and I was incredibly impressed with your speeches, your passion, your patriotism, so job well done. So we're going to start with our 5th place winner, and that is Abigail Welch from Peoria Traditional. Fourth place is Charlie Gonzalez from Vistancia. In 3rd place, it's our birthday boy, Dominic VanGrackel. And in 2nd place, Nevaeh DNA, Coyote Hills. And in 1st place, Seth Booker from Santa Fe. Thank you so much for participating with us. We appreciate you. Hopefully we'll see you all in doing some great things and speaking to us again in the future. Thank you.